A nationwide general knowledge contest for the title Brain of Britain 2006. The chairman is Robert Robinson.
Well, hello again. Now the path turns sharply upwards in the first of our semi-finals, where 4 survivors from London and the home counties return to the fray. They are David Stainer, a solicitor from London, Michael Lancaster, an editor also from London, Phil Anderson, a school science technician from Buntingford in Hertfordshire, and Brian Rolls, a systems analyst from Maidenhead, Berkshire. Shall I remind such veterans of the rules? 5 right in a row still earns you the extra mark, and good old 10 seconds are still available for thought. Here is the first question for Mr. Stainer. William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, and Harriet Tubman were all prominent names in which cause in the period before the American Civil War?
Anti-slavery.
Absolutely right, sir. Which variety of very hot pepper is often said to be named after the capital French Guiana?
Cayenne.
It is. Which British scientist is credited with the invention of the World Wide Web at the turn of the 1990s?
Tim Berners-Lee.
You're right. Walter Plinge and George Spelvin are counterparts in British and American theatre. In what sense? Walter Plinge and George Spelvin. Outside. Mr. Anderson?
Their names used on theatre programmes for people playing more than one part.
Absolutely right, in every particular. Well done. And now whose turn, Mr. Lancaster? A patriotic Memorial Day celebrated on Queen Victoria's birthday of the 24th of May was instituted in 1902. The name was changed in the late 1950s, and so later was the date of celebration to March. What was it originally called?
Empire Day?
Quite right, sir. Which technique used in fighting crime is known scientifically as dactylography?
Fingerprinting.
Yes. The reputation of the Jacobean playwright John Webster was made by 2 tragedies with very high body counts. Can you name one of them?
The Duchess of Malfi.
Yes, the other is the White Devil. Your turn again. In which event did Mary Peters win Great Britain's only athletics gold medal in the 1972 Summer Olympics?
The heptathlon.
No. Mr. Anderson?
The pentathlon.
Is right. It's your turn. Blanche Dubois is the central character of which play by Tennessee Williams?
A Streetcar Named Desire.
Correct, sir. Which leader of the Nazi Party's brown-shirt stormtroopers was the principal target of Hitler's Night of the Long Knives in 1934?
No idea.
Mr. Stainer?
Rome. Ernst Röhm.
Ernst Röhm is quite right. Mr. Rhodes' turn. Although others have also been so termed, 4 gemstones are generally thought of as precious or noble. Diamond, sapphire, and emerald are 3 of them. What is the 4th?
Ruby.
Yes, you're right. Which word describes the ability of an element to exist in 2 or more different forms with different properties?
Allotropism.
Yes. Bulldogs, princes, Dublins, and Pauls are all types of what objects?
Clips.
No.
Bulldog clips.
Mr. Stainer?
Marbles.
No. Nice try, Mr. Lancaster.
Coins.
Not coins. Mr. Anderson, don't be left out, I beg.
It's always worth trying fishing flies.
It could easily, couldn't they? Very nice names they would be, but they are pipes for smoking. And if I'd given you another one, church wardens, you would all have known it. And at the end of our opening round, the scores are 2 to Mr. Rolls, 3 to Mr. Anderson, 3 to Mr. Lancaster, 4 to Mr. Stainer. Mr. Stainer, with which art movement, beginning in the 1950s, but with its heyday in the 1960s, are the artists Richard Hamilton, Claes Oldenburg and Roy Lichtenstein particularly associated?
Pop art.
Yes. Which two territories amalgamated in 1964 to form the new nation of Tanzania?
Tanganyika and Zanzibar.
Correct, sir. Much in the news this year, which two-word phrase has been used to describe the moving about of terrorist suspects, particularly in Europe, by means of secret CIA flights?
Extraordinary rendition.
And isn't that an extraordinary phrase? I mean, as thick-headed language goes, it takes the cake. You're quite right, however. The great 18th century castle at Inverary in western Scotland is the seat of which duke? A lot of good dukes.
Fife.
Not Fife. Mr. Anderson?
Argyll.
Argyll is right. That's the one we were looking for. It's now Mr. Lancaster's turn. The world's tallest freestanding tower, the CN Tower, celebrated its 30th anniversary this year. In which city is it to be found?
Toronto.
Yes, you're right. And Toronto sounds like a racy sort of place. Someone said returning to Toronto was like finding a Jaguar parked in front of the vicarage and the padre inside with a pitcher of vodka martinis reading Lolita. I wonder if it's really like that. Goodness me. Your turn again. Which British author won the 2005 Nobel Prize for Literature?
Harold Pinter.
He did. Which dish, which seems to date from the Middle Ages and was originally of dried figs stewed in wine, became most associated with Christmas, not least through being mentioned in A Christmas Carol, but was initially often served in Lent?
Plum pudding.
No. Mr. Stainer?
Figgy pudding.
Figgy pudding is right. Well done. Mr. Anderson, which Archbishop of Canterbury was impeached and imprisoned in 1640 and executed in 1645, his policies seen as a contributory factor to the outbreak of civil war?
Lord.
Yes. Which Roman road ran from London to Lincoln and then on to York?
Ermine Street.
You're right, sir. Which French painter, perhaps the most celebrated so-called naive artist, was the subject of a major exhibition at London's Tate Modern in 2005-6 called Jungles in Paris, in reference to his penchant, or penchant, if you like that, for fantastic jungle scenes?
Cézanne.
No. Mr. Stainer?
Rousseau.
Henri Rousseau is quite right. Well done. Mr. Rolls, your turn. Which heavenly body is especially associated in Egyptian mythology with the god Ra?
The sun.
Correct. Now we have an excerpt from a ballet based upon African myths and legends about the creation of the world and humankind, and this work also proved to be controversial because of its use of jazz rhythms. Who was the composer, a very prolific member of the group known as Les Six? And who was the composer?
Rimsky-Korsakov.
No. It was Darius Milhaud, is the answer. That was a dance from La Création du Monde by Milhaud. The music was played there by the Ulster Orchestra, conducted by Jan Pascal Tortelier. And that brings us to the end of that second round. The scores are 3 to Mr. Rolls, 5 to Mr. Lancaster, 6 to Mr. Anderson, 9 to Mr. Stainer. Mr. Stainer, it's your turn. The physical constant relating energy and temperature used in calculating the entropy or disorder of a system is named for an Austrian physicist who died by suicide 100 years ago. What was his name?
Boltzmann.
Yes. Longyearbyen, nice name, Longyearbyen is the capital and largest settlement of an archipelago, which is to be the site of what has been reported as a doomsday vault, a top security facility to safeguard millions of seeds from around the world in case of major disaster, an initiative of the Norwegian government. What is the territory called?
Spitsbergen.
It is Spitsbergen, and as someone said of Spitsbergen, I'd a sight rather have Wednesday afternoon in pouring rain in Macclesfield. Oh dear, rather rude. The ODA, O-D-A, the body responsible for taking forward the preparations for the 2012 London Olympics, began its work in April this year. For what do those initials stand?
Olympic Development Agency.
No, nice try. Mr. Rolls?
Olympic Delivery Authority.
Correct, sir. Well done. Mr. Lancaster, in 1972, the revolutionary naval vessel HMS Wilton was launched, the first in the world to be built of GRP. What does GRP stand for? Plenty of scope for invention here, if you don't happen to know. Out of time. Mr. Anderson?
Glass reinforced plastic.
Well done. And it's your turn, Mr. Anderson. Marino Faliero and the two Foscari, the former described as a historical tragedy and the latter as a historical or poetic drama, both date from around 1821 and relate stories about real Doge of Venice, who, a resident of Venice in the few years preceding their publication, was their author.
No, I can't even guess. No.
Right? All right. Now, what about Mr. Stainer?
Schiller.
No. Mr. Rolls?
Canaletto.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
Leporello.
No. Lord Byron is the answer. And it's your turn, Mr. Rolls. Two of the great landmarks of social historical writing of the Victorian period were multi-volume surveys of living conditions in London. London Labour and the London Poor was published in the 1850s and 60s, and Life and Labour of the People in London, a generation later, in the 1890s and early 1900s. Can you name either one of the authors?
Karl Marx.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
Mayhew.
Mayhew. Henry Mayhew, and the other was Charles Booth. And that brings us to the end of the round. I'll see how the scores have changed, and they're now these: 4 to Mr. Rolls, 6 to Mr. Lancaster, 7 to Mr. Anderson, 11 to Mr. Stainer. And now we have 2 questions from one of our listeners. It's aimed, of course, at drawing all 4 of our contestants conferring together. Here is the first of 2 questions sent in by Paul Thompson from Scone in Scotland. Which 1960s TV series was shown in Germany under the title Mit Schirm, Charme und Melone? Yeah. Meloni's the good bit, isn't it?
The Avengers.
You're quite right. Well done. Now, I didn't recall, when I read the question through, I didn't recall any melon in it. And, of course, the word must mean something else. Perhaps you'll be able to tell us.
Bowler hat.
Yeah, bowler hat. Bowler hat. Umbrella, charm, and bowler hat. Funny title, really, but the Avengers, I think, is a better title. Right, here comes Mr. Thompson's second question. Which 1960s cartoon series was known in Italy as Gli Antenati?
Tom Jerry isn't 60s, I thought it was. It's some sort of psychedelic type.
He's got your fox, I'm sure.
Yeah.
However, you never know. Give it a go.
Tom and Jerry.
No, it's the Flintstones. Gli Antenati apparently means the ancestors. So you got one, very cleverly too. Mr. Thompson got one. By our quaint rules, that means he's won. He gets a book token and a round of applause. Mr. Stainer, an Australian film called 10 Canoes, directed by Rolf de Heer, won a special jury prize at this year's Cannes Film Festival. It represents a noteworthy first for the Australian film industry. In what sense?
Does it have an entirely Aboriginal cast?
That's not the answer. I like the sound of it. It was interesting, but it's not the answer. Mr. Lancaster.
It's in the Aboriginal language.
It is, sir. That is the answer. Near miss for Mr. Stainer, but Mr. Lancaster got it right on the button. Mr. Lancaster, in the Sikh religion, the Spring or New Year festival of Baisakhi, or Vaisakhi, one with a B, one with a V, pronunciation-wise, also celebrates the events of 1699, namely the renewal of the faith with the founding of a brotherhood. What is that brotherhood called?
The Granth Veda?
No. Mr. Stainer?
The Singh Brotherhood?
No.
The
Mr.
Amritsar
Rolls?
Brotherhood. Sorry, the Amritsar Brotherhood.
No. Mr. Anderson doesn't know. He shakes his head. It is the Khalsa, but it is spelt Khalsa. Your turn, Mr. Anderson. To which members of the rodent family is the large aquatic North American animal called a musquash, if I pronounce it correctly, or muskrat, most closely related?
Beavers.
No. Mr. Stainer?
Voles?
Voles is quite right. Mr. Rolls, your turn. Which rowing event, won this year for the 4th year in a row by Leander One, is staged in March following the same course as the university boat race, but in the opposite direction?
It's the Head of the River race.
You're correct. What became known in Japan before the modern period with a degree of grim humour as the flowers of Edo, the old name for Tokyo, because of their prevalence and the regularity with which they appeared?
Chrysanthemums.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
Well, it fires.
It was certainly fires. Well done. Fires in a very largely wooden city. Let me tell you the scores. We have 5 for Mr. Rolls, 7 for Mr. Anderson, 8 for Mr. Lancaster, 12 for Mr. Stainer. Mr. Stainer, it's your turn. Which Nottingham-born author wrote in the late 1950s the works Saturday Night and Sunday Morning and The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner, later to become key films of the British New Wave?
Sillitoe.
Yes, Alan Sillitoe. An ancient ruined city in northern Thailand, now a major tourist destination with its many temples, was the centre of an empire of the same name which dominated its region from the 13th to the 15th centuries, an empire at times considerably larger than the modern kingdom. What is the city called?
I'm afraid it's gone.
Mr. Lancaster?
Angkor Wat.
No. Mr. Rolls?
Oh, Kaima.
No, you're wrong. Mr. Anderson, do you have it? Does it come to you?
I'll just try Angkor by itself.
No, Sukhothai is the answer, yes. Now, whose turn is it, Mr. Lancaster? Each of the primary colours from which all others are derived, namely red, blue and yellow, has a complementary colour, and these are collectively called the secondary colours. Reds is green, blues is orange. Which colour is the complementary colour for yellow?
Green.
No. Mr. Anderson?
Cyan.
No. Mr. Rolls?
Magenta.
No. Mr. Stainer?
Purple.
No. Violet is the answer, which is nearly purple, isn't it, or thereabouts, but it's not purple, it's violet. Mr. Anderson, your turn. As of mid-2006, 4 women were members of the Order of Companions of Honour, about 1/12 of the existing membership. They come from the fields of classical music, art, literature and acting, respectively, in chronological order of admission. Can you name one of them? Out of time. Mr. Stainer?
Judi Dench.
Yes. Then we have... Oh, well done, yes. And then we have Janet Baker, Bridget Riley and Doris Lessing as well. Now, Mr. Rolls, it's your turn. PET is a medical imaging technique which produces three-dimensional images of processes and functions within the human body. For what do the letters PET stand?
Photoelectric
Out of
template.
time.
Oh.
Mr. Stainer?
Positron emission tomography.
Oh, well done. Positron emission tomography. And of course, in Huddersfield, they speak of little else. At the end of that round, the scores are now these. 5 to Mr. Rolls, 7 to Mr. Anderson, 8 to Mr. Lancaster, 15 to Mr. Stainer. And Mr. Stainer begins again. Rhytons, R-H-Y-T-O-N-S, were elaborate drinking vessels in ancient Greece, with a hole in the end to allow the liquid to spurt out. What form, often highly decorated, did they take?
The form of a shoe.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
A horn.
No. Mr. Anderson?
A shell?
No. Now, Mr. Rolls.
A watering can sprinkler.
I wonder if they had watering cans in those days. Well, probably, one way or another. Animal heads is the actual answer. Your turn, Mr. Lancaster. The Balkans take their name from a word meaning mountains or wooded mountain ranges. From which language does the word come?
Greek.
No. Mr. Stainer?
Serbo-Croat.
No. Mr. Anderson?
Turkish?
Is quite right. Well done. Mr. Anderson, which body in the United States has the responsibility for regulating banks, currency reserves, and monetary policy, including setting the base interest rate?
The Federal Reserve.
You're right. The song we now hear was a #1 hit in the United Kingdom 50 years ago in the early autumn, just before Britain's involvement in the Suez conflict. The singer was very popular with the military, was sometimes known as the Force's favourite, the title of Force's sweetheart already being spoken for. What was her name?
Come to the station, jump from the train, march at the gobble, down Lover's Lane. Then in the glen where the roses entwine, lay down your arms, lay down your arms and surrender to mine.
And the name of the singer?
Anne Shelton.
Yes, quite right. Well done. Singing Lay Down Your Arms with Wally Stott and his orchestra. Why was a slipper bath popular in Victorian country houses so called?
For washing feet?
No, nice thinking, sir, may I say. Mr. Lancaster?
Did it take the shape of a slipper?
Yes. It's a very obvious answer, isn't it? It was called a slipper bath because it's shaped like a slipper. Well done, sir. Mr. Rolls, the Bohemian Bliss family are the hosts of an unconventional weekend gathering in one of Noel Coward's most successful plays, written apparently in 3 days, when he was only 24. What's it called?
Hay fever.
Yes. The British Crown colony of the Straits Settlements, as established in 1867, consisted of 3 territories which had initially been controlled by the British East India Company. Singapore and Penang were 2 of them. What was the third?
Malaya.
No. Mr. Anderson?
Malacca.
Is right. That's the one. I almost thought you said it, Mr. Rolls, but no, you did not. At the end of the round, the scores are now 6 to Mr. Rolls, 9 to Mr. Lancaster, 11 to Mr. Anderson, 15 to Mr. Stainer. We begin our final round of this first semi-final with Mr. Stainer. The Vaal River in South Africa flows west-southwest from the Drakensberg Mountains to join which other river near Kimberley?
The Orange River?
Yes. Freesias, gladioli and crocuses are all members of the same family of flowers. Which family named after another well-known flower?
Lilies.
No. Mr. Anderson?
Tulips.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
Dahlias.
No. Now, Mr. Rolls. Pick one.
Chrysanthemum.
No, not chrysanthemum. Iris is the answer. Iridaceae. It's your turn, Mr. Lancaster. An actress who died at the age of 37 in 1930 started out as one of Mack Sennett's bathing beauties, but soon established herself as Hollywood's queen of comedy, working regularly with Chaplin and Fatty Arbuckle. Her career foundered through scandal and alcohol and drug addiction, and her relationship with Sennett is the subject of a musical by Jerry Herman. What was her name? That's to say, her first and second name. So we need two names here.
Got the first.
Out of time, Mr. Anderson?
Mabel Normand.
Correct, sir. And now it's your turn again. Voltaire famously wrote that if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Which classical writer, in his Ars Amatoria, wrote similarly that it is convenient that there be gods, and as it is convenient, let us believe that there are?
Cicero.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
Ovid.
Ovid is right, sir. Mr. Rolls, what name is given in Roman Catholicism to a set of prayers or services to request intercession by saints and designed to be undertaken on 9 successive days or once a week for 9 weeks?
The Nones. N-O-N-E-S.
No. Mr. Lancaster?
Novenas.
Novena is quite right. And that brings us to the end of our final round. In this, the first of our semi-finals, I'll give you the final scores. They are 6 to Mr. Rolls, 11 to Mr. Lancaster, 12 to Mr. Anderson, 16 to Mr. Stainer. So well done, one and all, but particularly Mr. Stainer, who, of course, now goes forward to the final. Next week, we have the second semi-final with 4 contestants from the south of England and the Midlands. Until then, I bid you goodbye.
The chairman of Brain of Britain was Robert Robinson, and the questions were set by Kevin Ashman. The programme was devised by John P. Wynne, and the producer was Richard